Welcome to the Untold Tales audio anthologies. Written by Hal Fulton and narrated by Melissa Del Toro Schaffner. The Unknowable. It is not always night here. Once I walked a cobbled path. I cannot say where nor how I got there. It was fully light. Or I should not say fully, because there was no sun and the day was not bright. I would say that the day was overcast, but I have no memory of clouds, nor do I remember the sky at all. I might say that it was early morning, a few hours after sunrise, but it might also have been near twilight. When there is no sun and no train of past events leading to the present moment, what does it matter? And so I came to myself. I awoke, as you might say, walking on cobblestones worn smooth by the long passage of time. Or if there was no passage of time here, perhaps they were worn smooth by the weight of memory, by the burden of sameness. The word sidewalk came to mind, but I pushed it away. It is not a word that belongs to this time, this place. That is one of those words from elsewhere and elsewhen. In places, my path was overhung by branches of trees that obscured my vision. I knew that I was still in the city, the broad empty street to my left, the dimly perceived buildings rising silently into the neon sky, looming, oppressive, yet indifferent. But I knew it as the countryside as well. In some direction, I knew not which, there must be a thicker, more substantial portion of the city. Were the streets broader, the buildings taller? It was uncertain. And in the opposite direction, was there wilderness, forest, stream? I felt it must be so, but I could not say how to find either one. I rarely encounter other people except at night. Even the gray man, glimpsed only occasionally, appears mostly in darkness. And most of the others are not real, not in the way that I am. They are human-shaped. They share my form and rough likeness, but I sense that they are empty. They have substance and mass, but inside is nothing. Or there is a something that I cannot see or name. But I emerged from a small cluster of trees to see an expansive lawn on my right. How wide, I cannot say. The grass seemed as though it had been cut a week or two before, but it seemed unlikely that anyone had actually trimmed it. Perhaps it had simply forgotten how to grow. Far across the lawn, I saw a large dwelling, perhaps some 4 stories in height. I want to say mansion or castle, but those are not the right words. Not quite. Words are so elusive here, but I will call it a mansion. It was not far off, but there was a sense of dimness about it. Not just the uncertain light, but almost a mist or fog. Do not misunderstand. There was no mist or fog. There was only a feeling of thickened air through which I perceived as though it were a piece of quartz. A short distance from my path, there was a stone bench, long and wide, with a low back. And on the bench sat an old man. I say he was old, but what does that mean here? He might have been 100 years older than I, or 100 years younger. He faced mostly away from me and toward the mansion, and he muttered to himself. His voice was low, and I could not understand his words. But I heard in them anger, a frustration, a loneliness. And I heard the undercurrent of insanity. He was real, not an empty automaton, not a shell. Or perhaps he was unreal in the same way that I was. I perceived in him not the rambling dementia of the aged, not the lostness of those who cannot see and have forgotten. It was the trembling clarity of one who sees too much, recalls far too well. I saw in him my future, or perhaps my past. I left the cobbles and approached. The bench was long, and he sat on the leftmost end of it. There was room for me, and I sat mere feet to his right. His stressed, rambling speech ceased almost at once. He turned to me slowly and without hostility, seeing me as if for ages his only visions had been of a dark interior world. And he began to speak to me. "This world is not the only one," said the old man. "There are others, vast and various, near and remote." I nodded, somehow understanding. He went on. "And I have been a traveler in those realms, the black ocean above the clouds, where the air is exhausted and there is only emptiness." His words touched the corners of my mind, but when I turned my mind's eye to them, there, I could not see into those corners. But I thought he spoke truth. "There is life out there," he went on. "Life and death and everything in between. Things we cannot recognize or understand, some immeasurably small and others whose immensity renders them invisible to us. But there is one of these," he whispered, "that hovers at the edge of our reason. We perceive it, but we know that it is at the boundary of reality, the frontier of our understanding. It is called..." And here he spoke a word, or a name. I am not certain which. As soon as it entered my senses, it was already gone, slipping from my brain as if I could not, or would not, receive it. So I cannot tell you the word. Let us call it the Unknowable. His voice was hushed as he went on, hushed with fear, and I knew not what else. "The Unknowable," he said, "is not just fearsome. It is fear itself. It is made of fear, the stuff of nightmares, the substance of decayed hopes and unfulfilled desires. It will reach," he said, "into your mind with claws and tendrils, or whatever it has, invisible and insubstantial, but real, terribly real. You know with a maddening realization that it is a part of you, that you will never be free of it, that it can reach out to you across light and darkness, across void and eternity. It is ice," he said, "and it is fire. It is the dread of death and the fulfillment thereof. It is every pain and suffering you have ever known, every sorrow, every shock." The old man paused, staring off toward the stone mansion, but not seeing it. And then he turned to me again, leaning just a little toward me and barely whispering, "But there is something else about the unknowable. Something else." I felt as though his eyes would swallow me whole. I saw madness and clarity mingled there, saw a mirror onto myself, and felt an uneasiness that trapped my breath. I even felt a kind of yearning or wonder as he said again, "There is something else." "And what is that?" I asked him. "What is it?" His eyes dilated, and his whisper barely moved the air. "It is beautiful," said the old man. "Beautiful, beautiful." Thank you for listening. We are always striving to bring you the best stories and storytelling here at the Untold Tales podcast. Please share this podcast with your friends and family and anybody who might be a sci-fi buff. We know they'll love it. And if you'd like to support the show for about 1 cup of coffee a month, you can go to the link on the bottom of the show notes in every episode and find a support this podcast link. We value bringing original, high-quality stories to you every month, and we appreciate your support to keep this podcast ad-free. Thank you so much, and have a great day.